like to welcome you to this meeting of the Council. This meeting will be live streamed and recorded for the benefit of those participating in the meeting and in the gallery may be captured as part of this recording. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay respects to elders past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interest of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and ability. Do we have any apologies for leave of absence? Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest?
Oh. Yes, could I make a personal statement, please, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, and that's under section 56A of Law 3. Next, Councillor O'Connor.
So, I would like to apologise for using the swear word on Twitter. It was inappropriate, and I agree with the editorial in the Border Mail today that we do need to maintain a level of civility in our political discourse. I regretted my actions immediately, but despite quickly deleting the offensive tweet, it was already too late, as a very sharp-eyed journalist had put it. So I again apologise for my use of an offensive word and trust that we can all work harder together to improve our public political discussion. So I hope we can all move on.
Thank you, Councillor.
Item 5 is open forum. We've got a number of questions. We'll start with Alan Davis. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wife actually made up this question. She's very concerned about the not being able to park outside the post office to get her box. She pays $40 for that privilege, and sometimes she can use it and sometimes she can't. So when are we going to get a 15-minute park outside the new post office for the people who live out of town? One of our neighbours had a stroke, Mr. James Taylor. He drove around the block 3 or 4 times and still didn't get a park, so he ended up parking outside the chemist shop in a half-hour parking and having to get back to the post office somehow or other. And if we do get these spots, they need to be policed, because we have had other people, when there's functions on in town, where people park and don't care less about how long they park there for. So we've driven home at different times without our mail because we can't park.
The Director of Infrastructure, Ian Allett.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, for your question. Look, ultimately, it's a question of parking outside the post office. We went through a consultative process with the post office and the traders in that part of town with a view to what parking we provided outside the new post office, and also there's 3 existing parks in Ford Street which you've referred to of 15 minutes. So where we've landed with that is to actually retain the 3 in Ford Street near the corner site, and there'll be 1 additional new 15-minute spot outside the post office beside a loading zone. So there's been a place that's been temporarily marked as loading zone since they took up that premises. So that'll be a loading zone and there'll be a new 15-minute space beside it.
Thanks, Ian. The next question comes from Jeffrey Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions, Mayor, relate to item 11.3 on the agenda, being the update of the Barmutha Park Committee of Management. As an introduction to my first question, when it was first proposed, the grant application to the federal government described the development as a new multi-purpose community centre. It was also described as providing an appropriate emergency relief facilities. And when the development was announced by the minister, it was similarly described. over time, it appears the centre has come to be regarded more as an adjunct to the sporting facilities than as a community centre. And this view has been given support, intentional or not, by council having assigned management rights to the function centre to the Football and Netball Club. The Football and Netball Club, of course, has no experience in managing such a business, and this is reflected, I think, in the general lack of promotion and utilisation of the facility for other than football and netball activities. I would like to see the function centre with its commercial kitchen and other facilities put out to tender to be managed by professionals in the business and to earn an income on invested ratepayers' funds. And later, representatives from CFA, the Salvation Army, Red Cross and Beechworth Health could also be considered for any future committee of management to better provide for its use as an emergency relief centre. And so my question, Mayor, is will Council clarify for users and ratepayers alike what is the status of the Barmeutha Park facility in relation to its use by sporting clubs and its purpose as a community centre?
CEO?
Thanks, Jeff. Look, I think you mentioned that the item is discussed tonight, item 11.3. I can't hear you. Can you speak into the microphone, please? Item 11.3 tonight, as you indicated, is discussing the ongoing management of the Barmeutha Park. As indicated in that report, we have engaged a contractor to have a look at various possible models to manage that site, and it will come back to us by June. We've said there with some suggestions about how the whole facility should be managed, and I would presume then that part of that discussion would be what's the most appropriate governance model for the hall itself. So I would presume, and now hearing that feedback, and Mark's heard that feedback too, our Director of Community and Economic Development, who's overseeing that project, can take it into account in that review some of the history you've outlined. I'm not aware of that history, but others obviously are, and that review can obviously look at the future of the community centre itself and how that should be governed as well. It'll be all part of the same mix of review.
Thank you for your reply. I just hope we do have regard for how the money was applied for to start with. Through you, Mayor, I would like to address my second question, to the chairperson of the former committee, Councillor Price. The agenda item covering this addressing possible arrangements for the future management of Barmeutha Park contains little or no comment on what precisely were the problems facing the committee and which were so apparently insurmountable as to cause the council to take the quite extraordinary action it did at the last meeting to suspend the instrument of delegation, etc. I believe that maybe a best solution could be determined if we knew more precisely the nature of the problem. Now, normally, I, and I dare say others, would expect to find reference to such problem matters in a committee's annual report. However, I believe, Councillor, you didn't write a report for the last AGM. Indeed, Councillor, I believe you did not even attend the AGM or any other monthly meeting of the committee for the last 6 months. I'm sorry?
That's incorrect.
That's correct.
No, that's incorrect. I didn't attend the AGM, but I attended meetings within the last 6 months. But perhaps to your question, Jeff?
I have here an attendance roll extracted from the minutes of each meeting for the last 18 months.
Okay.
So you're named. I would like to finish my question, Mayor, if I may.
Yes, but
Indeed, and further,
Excuse me.
Let me also say that when you did attend,
it's not recorded now. You made a statement that the chair hadn't been there for 6 months. I don't believe that's correct either. I've just told you. I'm not here to argue with you. Do you want to ask the question?
Me. And so I believe you hadn't attended for the last 6 months. And further, when you did attend, and this is a quotation, efforts to have important issues considered were, and I quote, thwarted by the meetings being kept short by the chair. You've been advised of that. You've got the same memo or same email. Through you, Mayor, I would like to ask the chairperson of the former Committee of Management what, in her opinion, were the principal reasons for the failure of the committee to progress anything major, and what responsibility she accepts for the demise of the committee, given her failure to attend any of these meetings and provide any effective semblance of effective leadership.
Quite different to the question that I've got in front of me, Jeff, but nevertheless quite happy to answer it. The Mayor and myself were nominated to participate in that committee. As you're quite aware, it's had a very a patchy history of people's commitment to it and otherwise. So we were there as the chair and the deputy to facilitate it, to help guide them back to a strong committee, as we have other committees of management across the Shire. I think that we did that. I think that we participated fully and that we opened up lots of discussion and assisted the committee to engage with the officers and the council present to get them back to a really fully functioning committee. You may disagree with that. To your point about my non-attendance for the past 6 months, that's just incorrect. So I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I just dispute that. And to your point about the principal reasons for the failure of the committee, there were no office bearers at the AGM. That was the failure of the committee. My comment that you've quoted, to progress anything major, that was a comment that I made when this resolution came to council. And that's in relation to the fact that the committee was still finding its feet within that first 12 months. And so they were able to achieve some small things, but nothing major, as you've quoted me on. And your assertion that council took the quite extraordinary action, as it did at the last committee meeting, to suspend the instrument of delegation and take direct control of the functions that were delegated to the committee, well, that's not extraordinary action at all. We actually foreshadowed that in our active Indigo strategy, that we realised that some of these setups don't work for our different committees of management. We have very effective committee of management across our Shire, and we have some that aren't functioning as well. So we needed to have a look at different models and see which model would best suit. And so now we have an opportunity with this committee not having office bearers elected at the most recent AGM to test out one of these models. And this is what's on the agenda tonight at 11.3. It says Council's Active Indigo Recreation Plan 2018 through to 2026, Section 9.1, Municipal-wide Recommendations, Item 12 refers to exploring the feasibility of introducing a new system of governance to better support and resource clubs and organisations.
It may be useful to read a transcript of what you said last time. I will just leave my comments at that. I'm happy to table a transcript if you like, because you were, I can quote you as saying that this committee in other centres, and you named Woolgonya, Yakandan.
Yes, that's correct. I just restated that then. The committees of management work well in other areas across our Shire. We've seen we work really effectively with them in other towns. This one does not.
My final question, Mayor, my third question is, in the matter of financial arrangements relating to the operations and ongoing administration of the facility, it has been a long-running and protracted point of contention and conflict within the committee. The previous committee ignored the matter, although it was raised or was an issue at nearly every meeting for the last 18 months, and it was left either deferred or unresolved, according to the minutes. The failure of the committee to address this and other financial issues, such as the payment of management fees, resulted in $18,000 being written off in December last year from collection from clubs for utility expenses, principally water, and this is a direct cost imposed onto ratepayers. Invoices for user fees were sent out about the same time, covering the previous 3 years, another $2,000. It took more than 12 months to determine what those fees should be. All of this on the watch of a committee presided over by you, Councillor Price. I'm afraid I don't think it's up to scratch.
Jeffrey, do you have a question?
My question is that during this period when the administration has taken on the responsibility for management of the facility, will Council cause to have resolved and presented to a future meeting of Council all financial arrangements relating to, one, the recovery of expenses incurred by user groups for utility services such as water and electricity and gas. Two, the amount of user fees to be charged to sporting and other entities that are regular users of the facility. And third, fees and charges relating to the use and or hire of the function centre by both sporting clubs, other regular users and event users.
CEO?
Thanks, Jeff. Look, my answer is going to be similar to the other one. This paper tonight does document the appointment of a contractor to go through a whole range of issues at that site. One of the lines talks about exploring the specific issues of the site governance, and my understanding is very much so that one of the issues has been the issues of recovering of costs and sharing of those expenses across different sporting groups. So I would expect the report that comes back to Council, I know that's going to be something like May, June or July, will have a summary of all the issues that are at that site, and that would include the issues about cost sharing and things like that, and sharing of user fees and so on. So I would expect that sort of information would be in the report that comes back to Council in due course.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Item 6, condolences. Do we have any condolences? Item 7, the recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 26th of February 2019, as published on Council's website, be. And 2, that the minutes of the confidential council meeting held on the 26th of February 2019, as provided to councillors, be confirmed. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Is anybody against the motion? Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor? Carried. Do we have any business arising from those minutes? Do we have any deputations and petitions? No. Item 10.1, the recommendation is that Council accepts the monthly financial reports as at 28 February 2019. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded Councillor Trenery. Okay, Councillor Goldsworthy.
We're still telling a positive story in relation to our finances. I still hold concerns about a completion rate for capital works, and with the weather turning, it'll be interesting to see whether they're delivered. Hopefully they are.
Councillor Trenery.
I too agree, obviously, that the completion rate's going to have to be fairly high between now and the end of financial year, but also note we've started work on the Beechworth Yakandanda Rail Trail, which is a good result, and there's quite a large list that includes Lake King, drainage upgrades, roads, so on and so forth. So they're obviously at it and having a crack, and hopefully we'll get there.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, the recommendation is that council accepts the attached Assembly of Councillors records. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.3, the recommendation is that council notes the Q Springs Water Extraction Facility Monitoring Report content and the action undertaken where required. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Shepherd. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1, the recommendation is that council endorses the draft Indigo Shire Youth Strategy 2019 to 2023 for public exhibition for a period of 28 days. So we'd like to move that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
Councillor Shepherd and myself have been on a steering committee for this youth strategy. We were really interested in the discussion about our youth strategy in terms of the impact that it has for the community and also on our resourcing, and I think that that's reflected well in the strategy. We've got a very capable youth officer in Sal Kimber, and I think this strategy really highlights that there is so much that we could do in this space, and there's so much that we're currently doing, and there's room to build on it. So we're asking for your feedback to build on from the consultation that we've already had.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
I've noted since we've been involved in this strategy how well our community and economic development team already work so well in this space, and it's exciting now to have a strategy that we have pages of actions that we can look for funding ourselves, but there's also lots of opportunities for, if you go through them, to work with our local schools, to work with our local services on providing some of the actions around these strategies. So I ask you to have a look at this and just see where you fit into this strategy and how you can assist depending on where you are in our Shire. So yes, it's been a good process. Look forward to hearing your response to it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of probably one of the contributors to it, a young fellow in the middle of the back row. Yeah, well done for all that you've done and the contributions that you make to our local town from a youth perspective, and hopefully this will achieve things that you hope it does.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
Just in summing up, I'd like to highlight in terms of what our youth officer can achieve and how she works. There's key priority areas within the strategy, and one of them is health and wellbeing, particularly mental health for our young people. And so this provides an opportunity and a challenge in that we need to partner, facilitate and advocate rather than focus on direct service provision. And that's something that we do regionally with other councils and other service providers to deal with mental health. So that's just one of the opportunities that comes from the strategy.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.2, the recommendation is that council endorses the draft Beechworth Railway Precinct land management plan and exhibit it for public comment for a period of 28 days. The CEO would like to make a comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, to councils, I need to apologise for an error in one of the attachments. I would like council to consider this item with an amendment to one of the paragraphs in the attached documents. Just by way of background, the current budget does include provision for potential refurbishment of the plate layers cottage in the current budget, although that provision was clearly subject to another report coming back to council on that, and council to make a decision on the future of the plate layers cottage separate to any process that we're conducting here. I note that in section 6 of the management plan, it clearly states in there, rightly so, that there's an action item to determine the future of the plate layers cottage, and a community consultation process will be conducted to inform council prior to that decision. However, I'm in page or in section 7.2 of the management plan that's attached, we incorrectly state there that the cottage will be refurbished, which sort of implies the decision's already been made when clearly one hasn't been made. So that's an error. And I'd like to change section 7.2 to say that no decision on the plate layers cottage has been made and is subject to a separate consultation process. So if council could consider that 7.2, have that sentence inserted instead of that last paragraph in 7.2.
Would a council like to move that amendment? It's a recommendation, yeah. Yep. All right. Could you read it back to me, Councillor Trennery?
No. I was about to say, I need that read back to me, please.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Trennery.
I'm happy to speak to it. Obviously, regardless of the added part to the recommendation, which is now the motion, this is obviously a very important issue with the railway precinct. We've had a lot of discussions about it with the Beechworth community and surrounds. We're sending it out, and I really do implore people who want to make a comment to bring it back. And I'll leave it at that because I think community input's the most important part of it.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch.
Just to say I agree with Councillor Trennery that this has been in the train for a long time. I've been on council for a long time, and I'm really pleased that it's starting to get done. Thank you.
Would someone else like to speak to the motion? So, Councillor Trennery. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.3, the recommendation is the council notes the process and plan to develop a revised governance model for Barmutha Park Recreation Facility via the Recreation Committee of Management Governance Review. Somebody like to move that? Yes, Councillor Goldsworthy.
It was just one raised in the public forum, and it was in relation to what the current status is with the facility and the users. I'm just wondering, what is the current status with access to it and the users and the payment?
Okay, Mark Florence.
Thank you, Councillor. So the current users continue to operate as usual. In terms of fees, they are still being charged a split of the utilities cost based on the long-standing ratio, which council is enforcing, and they're also being charged their annual user fees as well. So they continue to operate their own operations as usual and contribute to the cost of the utilities as usual.
Just the function centre itself?
Yeah, sorry, yes. The function centre remains under the management of the football club, but that will be subject to the review process.
Would somebody like to move the motion? That's right, Councillor Price. Would somebody, and seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Price.
Yes, so as it's already been discussed, this is an update on the future of the Barmutha Park Committee of Management. I think the discussion lays it out pretty clearly that the ongoing lack of office bearers indicates the replacement of the committee is not a simple or straightforward task. It's currently not clear what governance model is optimal for the future of this facility. The representative committee model has not been successful at this facility, and no alternative option currently stands out as a solution to implement in the short term. So Council's Active Indigo Recreation Plan, Section 9.1, Municipal-wide recommendations, Item 12, refers to exploring the feasibility of introducing a new system of governance to better support and resource clubs and organisations. I think that what we're trying to achieve here is that we don't want to impose a model on the Barmeotha Park that doesn't fit with them. We want a model that fits with them, fits with the users. Ultimately, when we're talking about these users and the committee members, they're volunteers. They're already normally an office bearer on their respective user committee, and so we're trying to make the arrangement here as easy as it can be for them and a successful model for the ongoing Barmeotha Park.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch.
This has been ongoing I've been on council for about 13 years now, and I think this has been an ongoing problem in that time. And I'm hopeful that this time the solution might be found, and that we really do have a committee that works together and we get things done around Barmeotha Park. Thank you.
Would someone else like to speak? Councillor O'Connor.
I just heard that comment, it was funny. Look, I think that the issues that Jeffrey raised tonight are very concerning. I think it's important to acknowledge that Jeff has raised these issues before with council, and it has been looked into, that we share those concerns. I'm not going to criticise any particular member of council, but that committee of management has not worked effectively at all for a long time. And so this is actually council's attempt to sort this out once and for all and to come up with a model for the future, because there have been so many problems in the past that will hopefully address all of the issues that you raised, as well as a number of other issues that have been raised through the sporting club. So while, yes, it has been a frustrating and not a very happy experience with the Barmeotha Park facility, it's an incredibly important facility for our community. It's important that we get this right, and that's what this is attempting to do. So we do take those issues seriously, and this is hopefully the way forward now, and we will come up with something that will take this facility forward into the future and be properly managed and run effectively, and as you say, get the community have access to it and to be properly to get good fees for service and those kind of things built into the outcome. So I'm hoping that this outcome is as positive as what it's intended to be.
Would someone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
I'd just like to read another piece from the conclusion. I think it sums it up best. Barmeotha Park is, as Councillor O'Connor just said, an important and valued piece of community infrastructure. Over many years, the committee has benefited from the dedicated work of many members of the community and sporting club representatives, not to mention significant support from councillors and council staff. Despite this, there has been a number of challenges, and this has resulted in an inability to form a functioning committee. That's why we're undertaking this review, so that we can have a clear model to go forward with in the future.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.4, the recommendation is that Council adopts the Ageing Well Strategy 2019 to 2023.
Excuse me, Mayor, I'd just like to move an amendment to it.
Sure.
So in addition to what's there, if I could just add in another line that is inserted in the document, priority area 4, strategic action. If it could read, support the Beechworth U3A in securing a suitable premises for the ongoing conduct of its activities. Yeah. So in priority area 4, in the strategic actions, if we could insert support the Beechworth U3A in securing a suitable premises for the ongoing conduct of its activities.
Do we have a seconder? That now becomes the motion.
I'll move. Do you want to move that motion?
I'm happy to move it if you could second.
I'll second it.
All right, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Try Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's a very good strategy. It does bode well for the future. We know that in years to come, more than 50% of our population in the Indigo Shire will be more than 50 years of age. The U3A that I've specifically mentioned in this motion is a very active organisation. They're struggling to find space that's suitable. They have been in the old railway precinct, and that's proving to be very difficult for them. I'm looking to show the council to try and assist them in finding suitable space where they can undertake their activities. And I think that's great socially for those that participate in that particular area. But across the board, the strategy is well written and well done, and congratulations to those involved.
So, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. This strategy is actually incredibly important for the future of our Shire because we do have an ageing population. In the past, that's been seen as a problem. It's been regarded as a need to have services for older people and, aged care accommodation in terms of nursing homes and etc. This is a very different way of looking at the reality of the fact that as we get older, we still have a lot to contribute to our communities. And in fact, it's often retired people who are our volunteers and our active and engaged community members. So it's trying to really change the way we think about people ageing well in their communities. The hope is that by doing this correctly, that everything from the way we plan our outdoor spaces and buildings, our transport, our housing, social participation, as Larry just referred to then with the U3A is a great example, civic participation, leadership, that is actually the lens that we think about people ageing in our communities. And we already have an incredibly active and useful older people in our communities, and I think it's important that we stop thinking about ageing as a problem and rather as just a life stage that we manage well, and this strategy is all about doing that. And I would also say that Council has a real commitment to try and improve the way that we do conduct our strategies, and this has been a really well conducted process where a huge number of people have been involved in having a say about how they want to see the community into the future. So I want to thank all of the people that were involved, as well as our staff that ran that and the consultants that were involved. It's been, I think, something that we can be proud of as a Shire, and other council I've been speaking to are not doing anything like this, and we're actually incredibly impressed that Indigo Shire was doing that. So occasionally it's nice to be able to give ourselves a tick and say we did a good job on this. So tonight's about passing that strategy. It's then up to the organisation to implement it and to look at ageing in our community in every part of our organisation as effectively as we can.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
It's interesting that this evening we're putting out our youth strategy for people to look at, and we're going to pass, hopefully, our Ageing Well strategy. And when you look across both of those strategies, there's similar concerns. So at both ends of our lives, people are still worried. They're worried about inclusion. They're worried about housing, transport, being part of the community, having a voice. And so it's just fascinating looking at both ends that it's more than ageing well and youth. It's just, a lot of it is just we need to support and be inclusive to our community and keep an eye out for everyone, really. But these are both great strategies, and I'm appreciative of the work that's gone into this one.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Okay, Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's a great strategy and we should support it.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.5, the recommendation is the Council places the draft master plan for the Waggunya Railway land site on public exhibition and seeks community feedback for a period of 28 days. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Price.
The Mayor, Mr Gaffney, and I have followed this process along with the committee that was established, and as a result of the May 2017 council meeting. This is a very high functioning committee that are very passionate about the development of this land and are backing it by their own Progress Association, partnering with different organisations within their vicinity. There's a lot to be achieved within this master plan, and they've really put it all out there. And I think going back to Councillor Shepherd's comments about what would suit youth and also the ageing well strategy, I think this space would cater for the whole community, and that's certainly been what the committee has tried for. They've also conducted their own consultation, as that was outside of the scope of the consultant, and they consulted with 70 people on Australia Day. They've also been to the schools and consulted with other various groups, as well as the Waganya Progress Association. So now it's our time to say what's missing. Is there any community feedback? Does this look like a good development plan for this very significant piece of land in Waganya? So we welcome your feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
It's hard to beat that one. It's a pretty comprehensive statement, and I think that Waganya is one of our communities that sometimes we tend to think they're a long way away, but they have a very active community, and they're very concerned about making sure that the facilities they get are the very best. And I think in here they have put a lot of thought into it. So I'm looking forward to seeing this progress even further.
I'd just like to comment that they are a very long way away, but they're certainly close to our heart. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
This really is a community-led master plan. They've basically undertaken a lot of the work themselves. They've consulted heavily with the community. My expectation is that it won't change a lot, but I also have an expectation that once it is adopted by council, eventually that we will work with them to get some of these projects completed. It won't fall on the community to do it by themselves. We will be their partners.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
I just agree with Councillor Goldsworthy's comments. We've been working with this committee and to get to this point now, and I really look forward to what the next stage is. They did flag at their recent committee meeting that one of their top priorities is a fitness circuit, and we've just seen one funded and opened in Wangaratta, and so the committee now will be working towards one of their first priorities, and that may well be it.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.1, the recommendation is that council accepts the tender from Murray Valley Piling for the design and reconstruction of the Sheridan's Bridge Road Bridge for the value of $601,000 excluding GST, and authorises the CEO to execute contract documentation. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Question from Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just curious, it is an item that's listed in the confidential agenda, and should we discuss it there first before we address it here? Or I don't envisage that there'll be much conversation, but given it's in that agenda.
That's a good question, and I think you might be right. The CEO is keen to have a comment.
So, councillors, overriding everything we do is the objective trying to get everything we can out of confidential and into the open public forum. One of the ways of doing that, I do note there are some other councils who do consider all of their tenders in confidential. We're seeking here to keep the discussion out in the public arena. However, recognising that aspects of the tender submissions are commercial in confidence. So what we've done here is actually we haven't listed an item for discussion in the confidential minutes, our confidential agenda, but the details of the confidential details of those tenders have been provided to councillors separately. And the way that's been done is to include them as an information-only item in the confidential part. So the discussions in the open meeting, the details are kept there as an information item. If you do have a question about the actual tenders themselves, then you're right, we'll need to close this meeting temporarily, open that meeting if you have a question of clarity about any of those tenders. But we're not proposing to go into confidential and make a decision on it, just it's there as an information paper. So unless you have a question on it, we can deal with it here now.
I don't have a question. I just wasn't sure of the process, whether it was worth discussing. And if it was, then maybe pushing it to the last item on the agenda so that we came back into public after confidential, after everybody else had left, and most likely passed the motion.
The comment that I've got is, we've all read the confidential part of this, and if we had an issue with that, we could vote against this, or if you had an issue, you could ask that this be moved to confidential. Is that what you wish to do, Councillor?
No, it was purely if we did have questions, I don't know whether others do, what the process would be. I was suspecting that there's no other questions, so we'll probably just get on with it.
Would somebody like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Trenary, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Trenary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, this is part of the capital works that we're talking about moving forwards, and some of the real work that council does with, dare I say it, roads, rates and rubbish. These things are very important, the bridges. I note within the report there's over $1.1 million worth of works with other bridges and things that are included in it as well. So it's very important that council get on with council work, and this is it going ahead.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch.
Yes, no, I agree with Councillor Trenary. It is, one of the major things that we do and spend a lot of money on is keeping our bridges and roads and transport going within the Shire. So, it is very important that this gets done as well, because we don't want bridges that are not going to be safe.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
I just note that of the vehicle bridges on our road network, the pedestrian cycle bridges on our footpath network, we have 148 in total. This is bar one of them. It obviously needs replacing. It's on the edge of our Shire, but hopefully we'll be better for it when it's done.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trenary.
Just very quickly, Mr Mayor, it's not really summing up, so you can rule me out if you want, but there's been a few councillors, including myself, very vocal about bringing things out of confidential, and I appreciate the CEO working towards that.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.1, the recommendation is the council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor O'Connor. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14 is notice of some motion, which is nil. Item 15.1 is the Mayor's Diary. Do we have any questions?
I do.
Oh, Councillor O'Connor. Payback.
I'm not doing comparisons, Mayor. I noticed here that you met with the member for Benambra regarding ambulance response times. I'm just curious, given that it's been an issue of major concern to this community, that our response times were so poor in Indigo Shire. Interested in what Mr Tilley intends to do to support improvement on that. Or I assume he wanted to improve it?
Yes. We certainly spoke to him. We've written to the State Government Minister for Health and Ambulance Services. And the latest is that is with her diary secretary or calendar secretary. If we haven't received a response by tomorrow, we'll take it further. But the local member is quite aware of that, and perhaps if the minister hasn't got time to see us or isn't concerned about this issue, which as you rightly say, is a very, very serious matter, I think our next step would be the shadow and take it from there. We've got a number of options, including the upper house.
So thanks for that. Also, are we getting some further discussion with the district commander? Or I just remember some conversation about what else we could do at our level, apart from, advocating to the state government.
The CEO and I spoke to the Hume Region Director of Ambulance Services. That ambulance officer made it quite clear to us that it's a resources issue, that it's not an issue for Ambulance Victoria, it's a government decision. So that's why we've taken that course of action. We met with him for quite some time, and there's certainly serious issues in Indigo Shire.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Item 16.1 is just for information, the decisions register, which is a new thing. General business. Do any councillors have any general business? Councillor Shepherd.
I just wanted to congratulate the community on a fantastic Yakandanda Folk Festival, yet again the 22nd one, and it was sold out again. I think one of the things that really interested me was the Halve Waste stall again, set up in the middle of town, where everyone who walked past had to look at their rubbish being sorted, which certainly made you think about what you bought and what sort of rubbish you were adding to those bins, because we were trying to keep the rubbish bins to landfill at the minimum. And it is quite a minimum amount. There was a report come out, I can't remember the number, but it's only a couple of rubbish bins have gone to landfill. All the rest have gone to recycling and to organic waste, and the Folk Festival composts that organic waste and puts it on the community garden. So it's a win-win for everybody. But congratulations to the committee, but also to the community who the major volunteers for the whole event.
So, Councillor Trenery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to note that last month I asked for us to advocate on behalf of Tangamalanga and Kiwa in regards to the NBN. Asked you to write off a letter, and we've got a response back saying there is going to be works done there, which is appreciated. I'm hoping I can distribute that to the people of Tangam. I think I just did. But it's and I note too that the head of NBN is going to try to speed that up. So that's a fantastic result, and thanks to all involved.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
There was just one thing I wanted to add about the Folk Festival, that our youth officer, Sal Kimber, with the youth, ran something called The Shed for the whole weekend. And it was amazing. There were huge crowds, a non-ticket event out the front, watching all of our local young people involved in music. And it really was a huge crowd. And I'd just like to thank Sal and those young people who ran that whole event. They were the sound people as well, and congratulate them on what a great job they did.
Does anybody else have any general business? Councillor Goldsworthy.
I'd just like to highlight an issue that was raised on the council Facebook post, just that in addition to the closure from midnight on Thursday the 28th of March to midday Saturday the 30th of March, the Golden Ball Bridge will be closed to all traffic from 6 a.m. Friday the 5th of April until Tuesday the 9th of April. So it's really going to impact over 5 days now, and hopefully after that we'll have a road that we can drive on without interruption. And also note that from a briefing with the Emergency Management Committee last week, Vic Roads told us that the roadworks on the Beechworth Wodonga Road will go through till June at this stage. They're a few days behind, but basically they're hoping to catch up a bit. So there's a traffic bedlam around here.
All right, item 18. The recommendation is that the ordinary meeting of council move into confidential session in accordance with section 89(2)A of the Local Government Act 1989. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor O'Connor?
I just think it's important to point out that the reason that we are going into confidential for the sake of transparency is that we're appointing a member to the Audit Committee, and we are also appointing some new members to the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee, and because their details are in the report, we don't do it. We have to vote on that. As soon as we've done that, that information will be made public. Sorry, after we've notified the successful applicants, but yeah, there's nothing sinister going on. It's just to appoint people to the committee and keep their details confidential until they're appointed.
So, Councillor Murdoch? Yes, I agree. Would anybody else like to speak to that motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Thank you for your attendance. I now declare the meeting closed.